Hello, everyone. I hope we are all doing well. Happy Easter to everybody. As you can see, our amazing sister and I have turned a new leaf. So we are here again
Because
this long weekend to have some discussions about life's trending issues. This one was actually one that I saw um, somebody ask on their platform, and it's opened a lot of discussion about this particular topic. And I wanted us to also have a conversation about it. I'm actually surprised that there's still people who are awake at this time, which is amazing. So now I know that if I come and sit here and do a propos at this time of the night, I'll still have good company of people to talk to. So, my sister, you're very welcome to the platform yet again. Thank you so
thank you.
much for your love and your time. Appreciate you. We love you. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Yes. So, how have you been?
I've been good. I've been good. How have you been?
Not too bad. I've been all right. I have a long weekend starting today, all the way down to Tuesday. So, I'm very
I'm
excited
jealous. I'm jealous.
about
I'm
that.
jealous. Oh
Uh,
boy.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So, the question I have for you is why, in your opinion, do you think that being single is demonized so much? It's made to almost feel like you have an incurable disease, like you have leprosy or you have polio or you have something that nobody wants to. So I don't want you to come and pass on this thing to me. Why is it that in a place like Nigeria, because I have a lot of friends and people that I work with, and if you're 35 and you are not married, you are single, you're a woman, hey, good luck to you. Why is that the case?
Well, I think one of the main reasons why in the African context or even in the African culture, we see singlehood being demonized, especially if you're a woman, is because our culture always demand, and it's a woman is brought up to be prepared for her husband's house. She's prepared and groomed to be ready to become a mother.
Mm,
So if you are 35 or an up and you do not have either a child or you do not have a husband, then there are lots of bells and there's lots of society. I call it society look down. People will begin to look down on you, and people will begin to undermine you. And at in even some instances, one of the things I have witnessed is that if you're a woman of a certain age, and even a man, and you're not married, people don't even take what you say serious. Like you become irrelevant, or
wow.
they tend to disrespect you in a way as if, like, what do you know about life? You've never been married before. You've never had a child before. So what do you know? Like what do you have to offer? And I think that marriage for us has always been the merging of two families, and then it has also been in societies like in Nigerian culture. It's also an economic thing as well, right? So and I've even heard something as bad as, in Nigeria, some landlords will not rent to you if you're a single woman.
Wow.
Yes, they will not rent to you. As a single woman, you have to, if you want to rent a place in Lagos or in Abuja, you have to either find your brother to rent it for you or get someone who is married to rent it for you, because the landlords will not rent their properties to single girls, right?
Hmm.
And why? Is a single girl not able to make enough money to take care of herself? Can a single girl not be able to own a property? Or because you're a single girl, does it undermine your value, or are you now valueless? Right? So these are some of the things that we see happen in our society. How this continues to go on And sometimes we want to shout at women empowerment, but some of these things are very systematic. It is embedded in our culture, where if no one has paid your bride price, then that means nobody wants you. That means you're not value, like nobody wants to keep you. You're not a keeper, right? So you're an outcast, right? So where we this demonization come from, it's something that we all need to question, and it's something that we all need to um reevaluate in the way we ourselves contribute to it, even in the church, right? Even in the church we see that happen all the time, right? Where, when women are not married, it's very typical to be part of prayer points. Women will be going for prayer meetings, seeking and looking for husbands. And for me, one of the things that's really quite disturbing about these things is I feel like because of that, most women they kind of rush and run into relationship. And sometimes we see all the repercussion that comes, which is with DV. And sometimes some of these women, they become a different person, right? And they tend to live a life that is not real, and a life that is a lie, just so that everybody can see that, oh, they are married, right? But meanwhile, who are you deceiving?
Hmm.
Right? Because of the stigma that comes with, and the demonization that comes with being seen as single.
Hmm. Do you also think that the fact that, when you're older, like you're in your 60s and whatever, late 50s, 60s, you've had your children, you've had a good life, now it's time for you to unwind and start retirement. Do you also think that the fact that in our society, being able to say, my daughter Roberta is now a judge living in Canada, and she's married with two children, like that whole thing, it's like a status and class thing for the parents as well, because normally the pressure comes first point from the parents. I want my grandchildren. Where are my grandchildren? I want my grandchildren. Where are my grandchildren? Over and over and over again. There's so many friends of mine that dread every time their mom calls. It's like, oh my God, she's coming to come and bother me about being married again. Like, here we go again. And so some of them actually avoid talking to their mothers because they know what is coming. I think I need to go and pray for you. I'm going to prayer camp. I have to. I actually have a friend whose mom took her to TB Joshua's church because the friend took their daughter there, and within 6 months they were married. So maybe there's something wrong with this other person too. And so they went there. She forced the daughter to go so that they can do whatever. And then unfortunately it was at that time that the building collapsed. So the rest is history. But yeah, it's some of the things that happen. So it's the parents, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the things I always say that we always talk about the patriarchy, right? And when we talk about the patriarchy, I always say that the reason why the patriarchy continues to grow and expand is because we women ourselves continue to be gatekeepers of the patriarchy, right? And most African parents, and it's not even just African parents, you can see that in some Caucasian families as well, right? Because I myself have witnessed this also in some Caucasian families, where they are like on the necks of their kids. I want grandkids, right? So it's not really peculiar to us when it comes to those things. But the most important thing is that how do we ourselves continue to oppress ourselves, right? Self inflicted wounds where we continue to be like, you are 30, you're not married, you don't have kids, right? And I know even sometimes in our own culture, in Ghanaian culture, they'll be like, oh, why don't you look for any man and then just have a kid? So at least you have a kid, right? I'm like, who now? And that's why you see people, they will entangle themselves in some relationship. Either they go and be someone's second wife, or you see a very educated girl, and then she'll be like, doing some things that is really, that it's gonna have a huge emotional and psychological and physical consequences, right? So, but all of these things is because everybody is asking, when are you getting married? Why are you not married? Why don't you have children? Why are you not getting pregnant? Right? So, in one of those things, I'm like, they're always going to ask questions. Once you have two, they'll be like, oh, when is the third coming? Right? If you have four boys, they'll be like, when are you going to have the girl? Right? So, one of the things I want everybody to think about is that any step of the phase that you do decide to go in, there's always going to be a follow up,
That's right.
right? So you have to bring yourself to the point where you understand that they are always ready for a follow up. So you have to decide, am I going to listen to them, or am I going to listen to myself first and see, am I ready, number one, to get married? Number two, do I have the strength, the emotional intelligence, and the economic opportunity and the ability to really birth a child in a nice and a well suited environment? Or am I just doing it to please my parents? Right? Because some of these things, some people, they'll even end up having a very big wedding because their parents won't invite all their friends to come.
So
Meanwhile,
same thought.
you and the guy don't have that kind of money to have that flamboyant wedding. But because your mom wants to invite all the women fellowship in her church, and dad wants to invite all the men fellowship in his church, and all his colleagues there, you say pew, and then after, you are crying, right? And then everything goes down to the drain, and you're both now at home about to kill each other, right? Because some of these things we always have to think about it, right? Sometimes too, you don't even want to go into that relationship, but because of the pressure, right, coming from the home, the pressure of society, you go to the office, and everybody knows you're single. And I will really tell you, like, one thing that I have been to Nigeria a couple of times, right? One of the things I always notice, there, if you're a married woman, they respect you so well. Even
Mm,
if you are young, an older woman who is not even married will not get that respect as you, as a young girl that you are married. People will be calling you madam,
I
right?
see. Because
And
you're
then
married.
because you're married, right? People will be calling you madam, right? Everybody refers to you as madam because you're a married woman, right? So you can imagine, like, the kind of psychological thing, like, that'll be going on. If you're seeing a very young girl who is married, like, look at this one that's married to the billionaire, right? She married him, I think, when she was like 19 or 18, right? She will now have somebody who's 35. The person is not married. Now she now has to, because she's married, she's much more higher esteem than you does not, right? It has, it has a lot, right? And singlehood, I think, is one of those things that even here in North America, it has seen, it's a struggle because you become isolated, right? You gradually become some sort of social outcast. And I see that people sometimes, as a result of that, they end up in such really bad relationships, or relationships that are not good for them, right? Because of the stigma, right? But the question to us all is being single, it does that mean that you're not a human being, or does that mean that you are inferior? Does that
Mhm,
mean that there's no value in
mhm,
your life, right?
mhm,
How do you see yourself, right? How do you see yourself? Because sometimes we are broken, and we are hurt, we are bruised, but because we don't want anyone to see us as single, we take all the baggages, the wounds, and then we go and cluster into another relationship, and that person is also going to come back with their own garbage, and the two of you will just be bumping heads. You want to move forward, then because of the baggage you get dragged back. You want to, like, there's so much things that happens, right?
Yeah.
But it's important that we understand that it doesn't have to be like that, right? It doesn't have to be like that. You don't need to get that social validation, right? Or someone says that social credit system.
Mm,
Why
mm,
you might feel like, because I've known girls that have shared, women that have shared with me, like they will cry themselves to bed at night because people are pounding on them being single.
yeah.
And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, so but one of the things that, if I'm talking to anyone today, is know that even when you're single and you get married, they will ask you about the children. Once you have one, they'll say, where's the second one coming? If you have second one, they'll say, when is the third one coming? When you have third, when is the fourth one coming? So there's always going to be an ask. So you have to really decide what is good for my mental health,
Mm,
what is good for me
mm,
first,
mm,
right? Because it's important that you are in that right frame mind before you now commit to a relationship, or even commit to bring a child into that relationship,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's what I will say.
Mm. It's really hard. I mean, as a single woman myself, I get it. But I guess now I've grown enough horns and everything in between. So I don't care. You can say whatever you want to. But I can see how it is hard. I mean, in this culture, yes, there are people who would ask the questions, but they are few and far between. It depends on the company you keep as well, right? Two examples of things that I wanted to talk about. The first one being that um, I remember the last time I went to Ghana. My parents don't make any issue of you're single, you're not single. That's not it. It's never been a, excuse me, a conversation that has come up that we've ever even had. But it is always those stray aunties and, those people like those, what we call a Busia long throats, those people, those, they are relatives, but they, you don't have any close association with them. They are always the ones that have to drive in that nail in that place, that side of your womb where it hits, like they did it to Jesus Christ, as a source of embarrassment. There's a friend of mine who is almost hitting 40. She was almost married before, but her fiance suddenly passed away. He was a
Ooh.
musician and he died suddenly. And then now she's single. She is not remarried. She hasn't found anybody. And the pressure is not just from family, it's from the church, it's from people at work. It's affecting promotion. Even though this woman is amazing, like at work, but no, you're not married. Uh-uh. I have actually seen a doctor. Before I moved from England here, my physician was Nigerian. She had about four or five sisters. She was probably the third one. So she had younger sisters and older sisters. All the other four people were married with children. Do you know that when they go for a function with their mom, so all the five girls, their spouses, and their mom, because their mom was still alive and living with them, like kind of hopping around the five of them in turns, she will be like, "Oh, this is my daughter Ijeoma. She's the judge, and she's married with three children. They live in Derby. This is my second child. This one is a teacher and whatever. This one, and that is that ugly one in the corner there. That one is the doctor. She's single and still not married. I have prayed. I've done everything. It's not working. Then everybody tends to look at her, and this woman who is supposed to be helping me, as I've gone to her place, literally broke down in tears and said to me, she tried everything. Like, she is quite a plumpy person. And she was told that because of that, it will hinder her fertility. So she went and did gastric surgery that went wrong. all kinds of things just to shut the mouth of those people that were coming up against her for not being able to have, like, she put her body through so much to the point of surrogacy that didn't go well. Like, it's like everything she tried, something has to come in to not make it happen. And I just said to her, why don't you just come to terms with the fact that maybe it is God's way of telling you that He just loves you just the way you are? Like, you're doing amazing things. You're a great doctor, a great physician. You're helping people day in, day out. If it is His doing and His timing that you are also supposed to be a married woman, it will happen. Like, when you force things to happen, I find that it never does. It's when you take your mind off things, you're living your life, you're not even looking. I have found that that is when amazing things happen. We force ourselves into relationships that won't serve us. We stay in relationships that we know are toxic relationships because we don't want people to come and be bugging us, like he said. So we're just quiet, but we're suffering in silence. How many people have passed away because they knew that they should have left their marriage and be gone back to being single? Let's just think about Osinachi as we're talking about this. And the rest is history. There's so many after her and a lot before her. Like, where does the buck stop, right? So, yeah, I
and
mean,
and
yeah,
these
go
are
ahead.
is pretty sad, right? And one of the things that especially when you see a lot of successful women, um that your success sometimes is also seen as something that's stopping you from becoming being married, right? And it's quite shameful because we, especially Africans, has spent at least, well, since I was in elementary school, we spent at least the past 3 decades promoting the girl child. And now that the girl child is getting to the place where she needs to be, it has now become a hindrance for the girl child to be able to um, now fulfill the next thing in her life, which is for her to settle down, start a family, right? Because your success is seen as intimidation. It's
Mm,
seen as you taking on the role of the male, right? And my question is, why can't we all work together,
mm-hmm,
right? Why should the success of a woman prevent her from having a good husband, right? And I find it very funny when they say, oh, like, they begin to start finding faults as to the reason why. So now she's a doctor, she's successful, she has money. But guess what? She's not married because there's something wrong with her body, right? If she was nice, pretty, and skinny too, they would say there's something, she doesn't have a bigger bum. So
absolutely.
now she's gonna go do plastic surgery just so that she can have a bigger bum, so that now men can now see her as attractive, right? And this goes back to what I'm saying. No matter what you do, they will always there's always going to be the next thing that they want to talk about, the next thing that they think that is something wrong with you,
Mm,
right? So the most important thing is accepting, as you said, accept the way you are. That God says that you are what you're fearfully and wonderfully made, right?
absolutely.
Because there are so much things that happens, right? And the human behavior and culture, if you don't take time, culture can drive you to the place of which will bring it to the end of the road, like Osinachi,
Mm-hmm,
right? And the most important thing, and this is going back to like even emotional intelligence, right?
mm-hmm,
Your self awareness
mm,
is very, very important. Your awareness is key, because the fact that all your friends are getting married does not mean that you also should be ready to get married. Because if
mm-hmm.
you really start reflecting, all the people that got married in their 20s, by the time they are in their 30s, half of them are already divorced.
That's true.
And then those who get married in their 30s, if they don't take time, by 40, they'll be divorced. Right? So we have a 50% rate. So you have to make sure, you have to think about it, that it's not it might not, it might be your final destination, or it might not be, right? So you taking your time and thinking about it and really, making that decision, it's okay,
Mm,
right? But being single, and I know this, do there are some companies that you work for that they don't see, especially, and that one even goes both ways. If you are, and I know especially in Nigeria, if you are not married, and some companies might not hire you because you're not a married woman, right? But all of these things are the different types of discrimination that
mm,
happens,
mm.
right? But how, and they're all violation of your human rights, right? But who's advocating, right? And this goes back to how we women ourselves, we become gatekeepers of the patriarchy
That's true.
system,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes I'm like, if we start thinking about some of these woes in society, some of these barriers, some of these things that happens, if we women are to really sit down and reflect and make decisions and say to ourselves, hey, is this right? Right? Is this the right thing to do? Today I was reading an article on LinkedIn about uh, black women and our hair and our skin color, right? Whether it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that is making sure that black women never wear their own hair, right? Or and then also black women continue to bleach their skin, right? Why is there companies like Unilever, right, all invested in making sure that there are things for us to use to lighten our skin so that we become who we are not supposed to be.
Mm,
These are all they're all part of it, right? Maybe you are too dark, that's why no man wants to approach you, right? You don't wear your hair the right way. You're not wearing the latest Brazilian hair. It's not frontal. It's not glued, right? You don't. Your makeup is not well. That's why no man is looking at you, right? So there's so much things, layers upon layers upon layers, right? That keeps pushing us back, right? And as I said, the church in itself is not perfect. Like I know some churches, they don't want to have any single people in there. And the
mm.
reason being, they don't want people getting into fornication and all those things, which is a valid point because all those things are even emotionally, it can destroy individuals, right? But how we approach those things is very
Yeah.
important, right? And it's very critical to the emotional well being of individuals, right? So, thinking about it and thinking about how some of these things violate individuals and make them worse off than they already are. That's why we see women who are going through a lot, bruises, on their skin, their hair, and everything. You know that this person, if they go back again into that home, they might not make it back out alive, but she does not want to be called single mom.
Or divorced.
Or she does not want to be called divorced,
Mm-hmm.
right? She
Mm,
doesn't want that stigma.
mm.
And as a result of that, we hear of it every day, regardless of where you are. It wasn't just a few weeks ago that even here in Calgary, somebody went to go to the point of going to the children's school and took out the woman, right? The children's school, right? I'm like, what? She's going to drop off your kids. Why would you do that in front of your child, in front of other children? Right? But these are things that happens all the time, right? Because nobody wants to be labeled. Nobody wants to lose that social credit system where you are liked because and you are respected, right? Because even and the thing is that these things are very systematic in a sense that, do you know that if you want to go get a mortgage with the bank, if you are single, they are not so
Keen.
single income, They start want to now dig you, dig, because you are single income. If you come as a married income, oh yes, right?
Mm,
Right? So these things, I know we always want to talk about things in terms of no, it is systematic. It's much more systematic than we think.
mm,
And it's really embedded in the patriarchy, right? So, and there are so much different ways in which we are constantly being pulled back, or we are constantly being led in different directions because of some of these things, right? That's why you see some women, they don't want to buy a house, because if they buy a house, men will think that they are, they are like, why? You cannot invest in yourself financially because you're single. And because you're single, you're not entitled to a good retirement. In fact, because you're single, you need to invest in yourself to make sure you have a good retirement. Because
exactly.
guess what? You are not going to
You are
have
your own
another.
person.
Yes. So you actually need to invest money in yourself because you're single. You're only one income. You understand? You're only one income. So it's very important that we think about it. So being single, yes, you're being demonized, but how can you wear it in a way that you don't undermine your own progress and your own success
Mm,
and your own future,
mm,
right? Because some people might look at Sinach. Sinach got married very late and still God blessed her with a child, right? Everybody will have their own turn. Every one of us, every one of us will get to the place that we desire to be, right? But it doesn't mean that because we are not there yet, it doesn't mean that we are valueless, or we are not important,
yeah.
or we cannot become what we want to be.
Mm, absolutely. I mean, if you want to know how you can debunk demonization, just be me. you know, just don't allow anybody to, and it's not, it's easier said than done. I mean, for
It's
me,
not.
I took myself away from the system back home that would have done really awful things to me. So I guess I don't feel it as much, but I hear it from friends and family. Like, I have a cousin who had all the qualifications to be the director for something, and they look at her, and you're 38 years old, you're not married, you don't have children, we know you have all the credibility and everything on paper, but where is your husband? She was denied the job because of that, just
Because
because she wasn't married.
yeah,
Yeah.
because now it's now becomes it makes her look like somebody who's trying to now take on the position of a man, right? And that's the thing that comes with the patriarchy is some of them don't want to be taking letting women call the shots, right? And it's very reflective. Even in our Western culture, there are more men CEOs than there is female CEOs, right? Because they want to, your place is in your husband's house, your place is in the home, right? So every day and everywhere we go is very systematic. It's more systematic than we think,
Mm,
right? But I think when it comes to those situations, is what are your boundaries, right? And most of us don't know how to set healthy boundaries,
that's true.
right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to set healthy boundaries where you are not so, you know, you people will not feel so comfortable in dragging you around, right? Because you need to protect your emotional and mental health.
Oh
It's
yeah.
very important, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
sometimes we don't want to be what do you call it? We are not married because maybe we have not met the right person. Does not mean that we are no longer um we will never get married. No, it doesn't mean that, right? But it's important that we see ourselves as people who are still in the process, right? We see ourselves as in the process. And if you see yourself as in the process, then whatever anybody says is not going to be relevant,
Mm.
right? And the most important is those healthy boundaries, you should set them at all times, whether you're married or you're not married, or even with your friends, with your family, with your parents. You need to set healthy boundaries with them, right? Because there's always going to be something.
Yeah.
There are people who are married for 10 years and they don't have kids. They will also be worried, right? So how do you set healthy boundaries so people cannot easily drag you down, undermine you, and make you feel inferior? Charlie, people are going through things.
Yeah.
People are going through things, right? You know, today I was watching something on the news and there was this woman, like, she can't actually take in pregnancy. Like, she can't.
Mm.
She cannot retain pregnancy. What did she have to do? Her eggs is not good enough to do it. They went to go implant someone's egg, fertilized egg. I didn't even know that you can actually go and get fertilized egg already. That is not yours. And implant it in yourself. And then now she had the baby, and now the child now has complications.
Mm.
But I bet you she felt all those pressure on her. Now she's now gotten another issue in her
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah. Bigger issue.
Yes, because
Mm.
now she has this child.
Yeah.
Then now she's has to do a whole. The child has gone through so many surgeries, right? So it is that's so. Be mindful. I know it's very hard and it's easy for me to say, right, to you, right? But I want you to really sit down and talk to yourself. I mean, you are in the process, right? It doesn't mean you'll be single forever,
Mm.
right? You are in transitioning. You are not going to stay in the same space forever. You are ever evolving, right? So if you see yourself always as ever evolving, it is much more better, right? And those unhealthy relationships, break away from them, right? Because you don't want to be in places where you're not being celebrated, right? And if it's you're not being celebrated, then that means you are in a very toxic environment, right? And you have to remove yourself.
Correct.
You have to remove yourself and set boundaries, right?
Correct.
You cannot
Yeah.
remove yourself from the life of your parents, but you can remove yourself from situations that creates those type of conversation,
Yeah.
right? Where everybody's like, oh, this one is married with 5 kids, you don't have, like, set those healthy boundaries, right? Because you don't want to put yourself in you can because I see girls all the time, you know, they just in their 30, then they start sleeping every time they can like they will just take advantage of you. Some of them, they are married, they will not even tell you. They will not even tell you. And then you just be tagging along. By the time you find out, they actually have a whole brand new family. They have a family somewhere, you know. And then now you are attached, and then you can't detach yourself because you don't want to go back to that stigma of being single,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So it's very, very important that I think as individuals we need to really understand ourselves, and as individuals we need to really look at our parents and the culture that we live in and really re-examine ourselves, because if we see and we want to listen to the things, you will do so many things, but none of them will make them happy. They will still say something. There's always going to be something else, right? So you have to set those boundaries.
Yeah,
There's always going to be something else.
that's true.
Like I have two girls, and people are like, oh, when is the boy coming? Oh, when is the boy coming? And I'm like, are you gonna join me, help me pay for childcare? Right? When is the boy coming? So do I have to wake up every day looking for a boy? Am I God? Oh, you the way you have these beautiful girls, if you have a boy, that would be good. Ah, right? You see, so there's always going to be something else, right? And you always gonna get undermined, right? If you're married and you don't want to be married anymore, you're undermined, right? No matter what, there's always going to be that demonization,
Hmm.
right? They're going
Hmm.
to demonize you if you're married and you can't have kids. They're going to demonize you and you have 44 boys and no girl. They're going to demonize you when you are in a DV situation and you want to leave, right? So you have to have that self awareness, set boundaries. Boundaries are very, very important, especially with our African culture. People don't have boundaries. You need to set boundaries because as soon as you get married, they start to want to touch your stomach. Did you carry? Are you carry? Like, who does that? But in our culture, people do that. And if you go and say something, they will say you are rude, you are disrespectful, right? But how do you learn to set healthy boundaries? You have to.
Hmm.
You just have to,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
you just don't have to let them demonize you or drag you along. That is why we see a lot of Gen Zs that they are very, very angry and they are doing so much things that they're not supposed to be doing, right? Because they just want to create some sort of attention. They just want to feel like they're revolutionizing. But the thing is, I'm sad to say, it is a system that is embedded even in the Western culture. It's not peculiar to us, and I honestly think it's probably something that's just human nature, right? The patriarchy continues to reign, and even if we have our first female president, it's still not going to change because when she goes home, she's still a wife, she's still a mother, right? And there's nothing that is really going to make that change, right? So it's important that we understand, how do we evolve individually and collectively, and how do we set good and healthy boundaries?
Hmm. So, if I'm summarizing everything that you said so far, what I got out of all of it is that as a person, you shouldn't allow society's views, perceptions, what they think matter to you so much that it stops you from being the person that you were destined to be. There's so many people who have gifts and talents and all sorts of things that are waiting to be birthed for you and I and everybody else to enjoy. But I'm waiting for when I get married. When I get married, then I'll buy a house. When I get married, then I'll do this, that, and the other. Why aren't you doing it now? Why are you packing your life to one side and waiting for that man to come and be some kind of validation to you? I always say this, that if God thought that you, my sister Roberta, are not good on your own, would have conjoined you to a man so that you know you'll be breathing through his heart. But you have two hands with fingers, you have a brain, you have two eyes and a nose, you have two legs that you can walk independently. That means that you, as a woman, single, married, divorced, whatever, separated, you're enough in your situation, whatever it happens to be, because you matter. Your life is valuable, you're important. So you shouldn't say, oh, because everybody in my church is going to now be saying I'm a failure because I couldn't keep my marriage. You know that you're keeping your children in a toxic environment. It's not helping you. You're always going to bed in absolute anxiety and panic because you don't know what's going to happen, tiptoeing on eggshells around that other partner. But you rather do that for society satisfaction rather than take yourself away from the situation and be safe. Give a safe space for your children to grow up in and become responsible adults in society. So, Ikwama, what would be your last words on this?
I think my last word really would be coming back to some of these definitions. Like, I know there are some religious organization that they turn to even humiliate women for not being married, or even if they're married and they want to divorce, right? Because their relationship is no longer, it's not a safe environment for them, right? So I want a lot of people really to think about all of these things, right? Don't think about what I kept saying. There's always going to be something else.
Mm,
There's always going to be something else. Even if you there, so if you think about it that there's always going to be something else, you come to the place of contentment. Well, that's what the Bible says. What contentment is, what is great gain, right? And if you get that contentment, because really, even before you want to get into a relationship with someone, you have to accept yourself and have that self love first, because that's going to be the only way, right? That you're going to be able to thrive and get to the place that you want to be, right? Don't do it because you're going to be demonized. Don't put yourself in a situation because of what people will say, or because there's that pressure,
mm,
right? That pressure is always going to come. There's
mm,
always going to be something else.
mm,
So create an environment where the self-love is important,
mm,
where you set, you if you need to set healthy boundaries, set them, and then make sure that you don't put yourself in an awkward situation where they're going to ask you, when is your husband coming, when I get him married. If those situations are there, or because your other siblings are married and all those things, and it's not a conducive place for you to be, then separate yourself. Separate yourself until you're ready, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because we all cannot be the same. That's
that's
why
right.
even our fingers are not the same.
Mm-hmm,
Our
mm-hmm,
fingers are not the same. We cannot not be the same. We cannot have the same DNA. God knows why He did that. God knows the reason why He did that. So it's important that we see ourselves as unique individuals, and we see ourselves as people we are going somewhere. We are always going somewhere. We are in motion, and we are always evolving. And there's
mm,
always going to be something else.
mm. My sister, before we leave, Auntie Elaine is asking, but what about the woman that chose not to have any kids or even be married? And I know people like that too. Like they just don't feel like they have that ability to be responsible for a man or a woman, and you know and have all these children and all of that. It's a bit too much for them. It's enough baggage, enough having to look after their own selves, not to think about having other people. There's nothing wrong with that.
I honestly don't see anything personally wrong with that. And I'll say that because I myself, one of my mom's sisters, she never got married and she doesn't have kids. But yet she's very, very lovely, right? She took care of some of my cousins, right? On her own, right? So I I guess it would be negative for me to say anything like, why wouldn't you? Because I already know people who have chosen those paths, and they're in their 50s now. So I know for sure there's no way they're ever going to have kids, right? And they're very lovely people, and they're lovely with children, right? I've never asked my auntie, why didn't you get married? Why did you two have kids? I've never asked her, because I believe in individual choices. I believe in an individual's right to choose what they want to do. And right, because I honestly believe that God gave us choices,
Hmm.
right? And that God does not impose his will upon us. So
No.
if God does not impose his will upon us,
Who
then
are
who am
you?
I to impose my will on somebody else, right? So if you choose whatever choice that you take, you have to live with the consequences. So if you choose not to raise a family, then you know that that is the path that you're choosing, right? And I going back to what I said earlier, that means you have to invest in yourself, because you're not going to have two retirement income or two income. So as a woman, you have to make sure that you make sure you're financially stable, or if you're a man, you're financially stable to be able to take care of yourself as you get older, right? Not that having children will mean that you get financial. It's just that if you have another partner, your wealth increases, right? There's an economic benefit of being married, right? I know people tend to shun that and see undermine that, but it's actually a very powerful tool, even in the Western world,
My sister,
right?
only if you are married to a responsible man. Oh. If you go and marry
I
some,
know.
yeah, yeah, some people can be baggage personified. Please.
I know, but generally there is an economic benefit of being two income household,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that there's anything wrong if that's a choice that you want, right? But the Bible says that a man will leave his father and mother and be clean to his wife. That is what the Bible says. But God has also given us choices, and we can all choose to do what we want to do. The most important thing is that we live a life that is worthy, and a life that makes us brings glory, and a life that makes us feel fulfilled, right? Because it's when you don't feel fulfilled, that is when it's a big struggle, right? And that's the reason why I said self-awareness is very important, right?
You know, I think that a good healthy marriage between two people that are ready to be married can be an absolutely amazing thing. I've witnessed some very fantastic couples in my lifetime, and I've also seen some very horrific ones in my lifetime too. I'm actually dealing with a distant relative of mine in a DV situation as we're speaking right now. So you see the best of both worlds. Like there's a very nice, good side, and there's a not so nice side. And maybe this is a topic for another day, but there's a big question also to be asked when people are piling on pressure. You are a doctor, you are now 30 years old, and all of this, you have to get married. It's as if you don't have to do any preparation to be married, even mentally and psychologically. Are you ready to take on the responsibility of somebody else? Because when you're married, you're sharing your life with somebody else. So if you haven't figured out how to run your whole life, how are you going to be responsible for somebody else? Like it's a good thing. I'm not knocking it, but I'm equally also saying that it's not that easy. People make it look like it's just, a walk in the park. You are a married woman. Is it easy? Do you wake up every day? I'm so excited to be married. No, marriage is work. That's the truth. It's work. So if you're not mentally and physically, spiritually, financially, and everything wise ready for it, that level of commitment, then things just don't work out, right? So
Yes, I
that
mean,
point must also be made clear.
it is, I mean, like that's why we have a lot of women, they go in postpartum depression, and people don't even know, they're not aware of it. But there are so much things, especially in this day and age. Thinking about our mental health is key, and thinking about our emotional health is also key, and
Mm,
making sure that we're getting into relationship commitment emotionally ready and
yes,
emotionally being available, right?
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
you can be married and the person is not emotionally available, and there's nothing you can do about it,
Mm-hmm,
right? The
mm-hmm,
person is not going to abuse you, they're not going to do anything, but they will not be emotionally available for you. Never, right? So it is one of those things that I think that I know it's hard that people get looked down on and many things, and when we decide to become single or anything. But for me, I always tell, don't, the most important thing is that you're not making the decision because of somebody. You're
mm,
making the decision because of yourself, right? You're choosing because you have sat down and you decided that this is what it is for me. Don't make the decision because of somebody else.
mm,
Make it because this is for me, right? This is for me, Sika. This is for me, Ekwamwa. This is for me, right? Not because of Sika that I'm making that decision. No, I'm making that decision is because that's the decision that gives me contentment.
Mm. That is big. That is really grand because if you just do follow, follow,
And a lot of people do follow.
yeah.
A lot. A lot of people do follow, and that is it's very, very dangerous. A lot of people do follow. So it's important that we do things because that is what makes us happy or bring us contentment.
Last word before I let you go. It's past your bedtime.
It's already past my bedtime and I hardly had any sleep last night. I was up to like 2 in the morning.
Oh no.
I think this we really the most important thing is let's know who we are, and we shouldn't allow people to define who we are.
Mm,
Because the moment you allow people to define you, they can define you in whichever way that they want to,
mm,
right? So, multiple times, I don't want to go very religious. Multiple times, Jesus was asked, "Are you the Son of God?" Right? And he kept saying, "Who do people say that I am?" Because people were talking. So you should always think about it. People are always going to
going
talk.
to talk. Yeah.
Even when they know who you are, they still want to question you.
Yeah.
They still want to question your identity,
Yes.
right? So it's important that you understand that that is going to be part of life.
Mm,
And rather, there was never a time Jesus debated them. There's never a time that he tried to do anything to prove or disapprove to make them, rather what he did was he focused on his ministry. He
mm,
focused on the purpose that he was on earth for, right? And that's why today you and I can celebrate this day
yeah.
as Good Friday, right? So always think about it. People are always going to question your identity, right? It's up to you for you to let your identity truly show for the purpose that God has called you,
Mm,
right? So
mm.
being single, being married, whatever the labels are, is that what God has called you to be? So that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, my darling. I'm not gonna keep you anymore. Somebody's wife. Eh? Let you go. I don't
Okay.
want any trouble
Good
from
night.
Oga. Thank you so much, my
Okay. Good
darling.
night.
Carry on
Okay.
next
Okay.
time. God bless
Okay.
you. Good night.
Bye.
Mwah. Bye.